Power is a corrupting force. It can be like an abrasive ether that slowly corrodes, wears down, and erodes. Or it can be like a torrent that washes away the ground beneath our feet. Or it can be like a tidal wave that smashes and consumes everything in its path. Okay, you get the point. But at the same time, power is one of the things that makes all the difference in the world. And in my life, I've had an interesting internal and external dialogue about power, ranging from we need good ways to exercise power to we need to give up the notions of power can ever be a good thing. And to be honest, I don't know where I stand or where I land when it comes to this conversation of power. But I do know what it feels like to be powerless. And that's not something I want. I don't want that for anybody to ever feel powerless. There is a difference, though, between being powerless and giving up power. I remember I had a friend who lived on the streets of Honolulu, and he took me on a tour of the places that he would inhabit. He wanted us to know where we could find him. He took us to this one spot. There was this little nook and cranny behind an office building, and he proceeded to move a planter that revealed a power outlet. He pointed to the power outlet and said, when you don't have any power, finding power makes all the difference in the world. Yes, he was talking about electricity, but the point he was making was much more profound than the ability to charge your cell phone. The story of Joseph that we have been going over for the summer is a story about power, about who has it, how it is exercised, and what it looks like to lose it, and what it looks like to gain it. We have looked at the idea of power from different perspectives, and today I want to take a look at the story of Joseph from the perspective of having, losing, and finding power in three movements: overcoming oppression, overcoming obstacles, and overcoming opportunities. So let's jump into the first movement: overcoming oppression. And I think the way that we can talk about overcoming oppression is through three vantage points: position, privilege, and power. Within any given society and culture, there is an imagination for what the exercise of power looks like. There are usually clear roles and positions of power: who gets, maintains, and wields it. There are usually clear markers of privilege that position and power afford. We can all see it pretty clear in our minds, especially when it's pointed out to us. In our society today in the West, we see power attached to celebrity and capital. And the propaganda of our society tells us that this is what we want. We want celebrity and capital. Our politics is driven by the prestige of how we see power, which is why it is possible for a reality TV star who has no political experience or acumen to become the president in a country that sees power nestled in the bosom of celebrity and capital. In different cultures throughout history, power has looked different, but its effects and affects are always the same. Ask the question, who does our society say we should want to be like? And you are probably beginning to uncover what positions and what privilege is attached to power. So whether it is kings, CEOs, celebrities, village chieftains, heads of family, power is used as an organizing principle that is utilitarian and totalitarian most often. Oppression is always the result of skewed power dynamics, the result of when some have power and others are powerless. So in any given system, community, or culture, the question of who has power and who doesn't will uncover oppression. And without a different imagination for what power could look like, we often see oppression show up in a cyclical form with power changing hands and the oppressed and the oppressor showing up in ways that are not always clean drawn lines. It is very much possible to be powerless in one facet and to use power oppressively in another. The story of Joseph is a story of oppression. Joseph carries the role of both the oppressed and the oppressor throughout this story. Joseph is the favored son of Jacob, called Israel. He is afforded prestige and privilege because of the position he holds as his father's favorite son. Joseph tries to wield this position and privilege as power over his brothers. Joseph has two dreams that he interprets and his family also interprets as Joseph grasping for and seeking to lord power over them. This doesn't go well. Joseph's brothers respond to Joseph's power moves with a power move of their own. They seek first to kill Joseph, but after some debate, they end up selling Joseph, their brother, to human traffickers that end up selling Joseph into a life of slavery in Egypt. Joseph has gone from the one trying to wield power over to being crushed under the power of enslavers, his brothers, the human traffickers, and the Egyptian household he was sold to. In this part of Joseph's story, we see that the politics of power, the choice to try to wield power, has very real oppressive consequences. Now, this is not to say that Joseph or any person ever deserves to be enslaved and trafficked. The reality shows the horror and the terror that power often brings out. Power often seeks to crush and destroy others in a clash of who can be most powerful. The second movement that I want to explore is called overcoming obstacles, or what I like to call conspiring for hope. When we come to the next chapter of Joseph's life, he is enslaved in an Egyptian household. He is powerless, but we soon see Joseph begin to gain position even as an enslaved person. He becomes the second in command after his enslaver in a household full of enslaved persons. Joseph again mistakes position and privilege as power, and in an instant finds it all stripped away from him again once more. Joseph is accused of a crime that he did not commit and is thrown into jail for this. He finds himself once more in a position of utter powerlessness as a result of others exercising power over him. First his brothers, now his enslaver. Joseph now finds himself forgotten and rotting in prison. While in prison, Joseph meets two other men. These men had served in the royal court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. These two men have dreams, and Joseph tells them what these dreams mean. One of the men will be freed from prison and restored to his position of power, but the other would not. The other would die at the hands of power. Power has the potential to raise up and strike down. Joseph tells the one who will be freed to remember him and to help him gain his freedom. Joseph begins to place his hope in the fact that power could also restore him. And from his place of powerlessness, Joseph is hoping that power can make a difference in his life, in his world. Joseph is eventually raised up by power. He comes to a place where he is given a new position of power with all of its privileges. Joseph becomes second in command to Pharaoh. Joseph's hopes of power making a difference in his world have come true. The story doesn't say it outright, but Joseph went from being a rapscallion youth with no patience to being a person who was patience was all they had. Joseph spoke what was on his mind, and he did so recklessly when he was a youth. And this cost Joseph everything. This is known as letting your mouth write checks that your biblical donkey can't cash. But the hardship that Joseph faces doesn't make Joseph hopeless. It makes him patient. He waits, he plots, he waits, he thinks, he waits. I picture Joseph sitting in his cell writing. I've been patiently waiting for a track to explode on. You can stunt if you want, but you know you get rolled on. I grew up without my pops. Should it make me bitter? I caught cases, didn't cop. I ain't no quitter. So basically, in my imagination, Joseph is 50 Cent. But it makes sense, right? It makes perfect sense. And I want to move. So this from this place here, I want to move to the third movement, overcoming opportunities. And I call this position, privileged, and power revisited. But as Joseph rises to positions of power that he could not have imagined, or maybe it's better to say he could not have dreamed of, and it is in this place of power that we see Joseph still doesn't get it. Joseph is liberated from slavery, but he uses his liberation and newfound power to devise a scheme to enslave all of Egypt. Joseph is enacting his trauma on others, and thus the wheels of oppression keep turning. I cannot help but think of Toni Morrison's famed quote: "The function of freedom is to free someone else." But Joseph has chosen to use his freedom to enslave others instead of liberate. Joseph could have used his newfound position and privilege to design a more just society. Instead, he chose to enact the same violence that was done to him onto others. Eventually, Joseph's family, his brothers, the ones who sold him into slavery, show up in Egypt, desperate and in need of help. Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize Joseph. Joseph ultimately helps his brothers without letting them know who he was, but he also torments them. He tests them. He makes them feel powerless. He makes them feel the powerlessness that he felt. He toys with them, lording his power over them. He had the opportunity to forgive, to grow, to live his own life, but he takes the opportunity for revenge and get back instead. Joseph makes slaves out of the people who enslaved him, the Egyptians. Joseph makes powerless those who crushed him with their power, his brothers. But these weren't the only choices available to Joseph. In conversation leading up to this message, Megan pointed out to me that often we don't realize the choices that we are making. We think we are just following a script. We are victims of fate. But often when we feel we have no choice, we are just choosing to make unreflective choices. The story we are telling ourselves says that what is happening is necessary and unavoidable. They hurt me. They deserve to be hurt. It's karma. I'm just doing to them what they did to me. And this is what Joseph did. He allowed the pain he felt to be the catalyst for the pain he caused. But we don't have to allow what has been done to us or even what we have done to others to become the definition of our lives. We can choose a different story. People are truly liberated from oppression when both the oppressed and the oppressors are no longer ensnared in the systems of power that cause oppression. But this is not the easy way. This will cost you your position. This will cost you your privilege. It will cost you your power. But this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. Being powerless is not the same as giving up power. Being powerless is the result of a system that strips people of power. Giving up power, I think, creates the possibility for us to imagine a world where everyone is empowered. Giving up power says that the way we have held on to power in this world isn't working. And we are opening ourselves up to the possibility of creating and cultivating new ways of being connected to one another. I've always loved the story of Joseph. It has spoken deeply to me. It is a story of overcoming. It is a story of not just surviving, but coming back and thriving. But I wish it was also a story of reimagining power in this world. I wish it was also a story where we see justice as making a better world possible and not just punishment for the pain caused in this world. I wish it was a story where forgiveness creates the new imagination and not power. I think ultimately what the story of Joseph teaches me is that we need to name the opportunity to create the world we want to inhabit instead of creating a world that is just a juxtaposition of the one we don't.